Richard Branson uses all the time, takes on the biggest opponent he can. He's not interested whether he wins or loses. It gets him the necessary and required publicity.
Great.
Flyers for him.
Yeah, I'll put it in tonight. I'm going for the lecture tonight.
Can you set all that up for me, Ella?
Yeah.
Give me the remote.
Got an airbrush, is it? Anyone me now? Right. Okay. That's fine. But if that's what we're going to do, then we have to focus. We would have to focus on that.
Going on the market. Would I be here 5 days a week?
Where's that other remote cell?
Okay, let's go like this. Look, if somebody comes into the gym and asks you what is fat,
Yeah.
that's not a disembodied question. I would imagine that anybody coming into the gym and asking questions about fat would either be one or two people, an interested builder, right, or somebody who'd ask you because it represented a problem. I don't think either that it would be somebody who was underweight, because somebody coming to a gym and asking somebody in a gym, how can I put on fat, doesn't make sense to me. They'd want to know how they would put on muscle. So it's just the other end of the spectrum. It's either people who want to remove a little because they're going in for a competition, or people who want to get rid of it. So in that context, when I say what is fat and I'm fat, what I mean is, why have I got it, and why?
Yeah, but you do that in your book. You say that in your book. You do that, and you give a brief little biochemical description of fat. We say, but the general concept behind that question,
Yes.
or the general whatever it says behind the question is, what's this fat here? This subcutaneous fat beneath the skin.
Let me think. Okay, so if I
That's
ask you
the
a
way you
question
put it.
about what's the fat here, is that
Yeah.
the same question?
That's the same question.
So if I ask you a question like, what's the fat under my chin? What's
Yeah.
the fat round my waist?
Yeah, that's right.
That's, I mean, it's all it is for me.
Yeah.
So, I'm asking. You're now saying that's a specific question about fat.
Yes.
It isn't all the questions you can ask
No.
about body fat.
No, that's
Okay,
right.
so answer that, because I can put that in. You see.
Yeah.
This is a specific question. Okay, so in brackets I'd have to put that there are other specific questions.
Yeah, you can also put in it, you know, I mean, when people ask this question, they don't automatically want to know the biochemistry definition of fat. What they
Right.
really mean is, what is this fat, this unacceptable fat on my body?
Doing it, yeah. How
Doing
did it get it?
What is it? What constitutes it? And
Okay,
how can
so
I get rid of
do
it?
that now? No, not yet. Not how
No,
can I get rid of it? Okay.
And what is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So
And then we explain it.
So what? Give me the sense of
Broad
the
concept, it's stored food.
So the broad sense is now. So fat is stored food. Is that a truism right down the line,
Oh, yes,
or
yeah.
is there any exception to that?
There's no exception at all.
So
It's
any-
stored, your body can only do two things with food: use it or store it.
Can't it excrete it?
No, they excrete the remains. And yeah, of course, if you have a digestive problem, it can excrete undigested food.
Okay.
But we're talking about a normal circumstance of the person in normal health who's able to digest the food. The body can only do two things with it: use it or store it.
So a body digests all the food,
A body
apart from the
digests.
stuff it can't digest. And
Yeah,
you see
you'll
what I mean?
find, unless there is an impairment in the digestive system, your body can. We would precede this chapter by a description of food. What constitutes food?
Right.
The substance, to qualify for being called food, the substance must both nourish and sustain you.
Okay.
Then it qualifies for being called food.
So the
We
fat,
can do, if you wish, we can do, and I always do it in a lecture, we can broaden that out a little bit by going into correct food for correct forms of life.
Okay.
For specific forms of
Now a
life.
question would arise in my head now.
Go on.
If I eat food which
Let me
hasn't got,
finish
if
this
I
then.
eat meat
Yeah.
without any fat in it,
Yeah.
will I put fat on?
Of course you will. Your body converts, your body,
Right. This is good.
your body can convert actual fat, glycerol and stuff, into subcutaneous fat. Your fat cells
Yes.
do contain some actual fat, the glycol and ethyl and chemical fats. They do contain some of them, but the most of the substances in the fat cell is converted carbohydrate,
Right.
which is, the conversion is done in the form of sugar. It's either it's glycogen or what's the word for it?
Glucose or
Glucose, a form of glucose,
Yeah.
glycogen, and that constitutes the main bulk of this substance here, this unacceptable substance.
So this
which we
fat
call
cell.
fat.
So this fat cell is actually full of sugar.
It's full of sugar.
Okay, so again, I'm still not sure about this. If I eat
Sugar and water.
okay, if I eat carbohydrates
Yes.
and I eat
Your body
protein,
can be,
wait a second. Would if I had too much of it, could that make me fat?
but it will make you fat.
So anything you eat,
It will.
so definitely it will.
Yeah.
So anything I eat, my body will either use or convert into fat.
That's correct.
So these, I was led to believe that if you wanted to have big muscles, you ate muscly type food.
Right.
Is that not an OOI sense? Is that not, strictly speaking, not true?
It's not true and it's not untrue. Muscle size, let's say, clinically speaking, hypertrophy or enlargement of the muscle
Yeah.
depends on two factors.
Right.
The actual enlargement or splitting of the actual muscle fibres, which is still an area of doubt.
Right.
Some authorities say the muscle fibres split and enlarge themselves and everything else. But there is no doubt that there has to be muscle fibre. Now that muscle fibre is built of protein.
Right. Okay.
Protein.
Right.
Now, every muscle, every skeletal muscle you have, this is very important, has its own individual energy supply. That energy supply is dependent upon your lifestyle. That supply of energy in the particular muscle is quantifiable. It's in a liquid, along with lots of other things. The liquid is called sarcoplasm. And that energy supply is broken down carbohydrate, glycogen and glucose. The amount of it in the particular muscle depends upon the use that you're putting the muscle to. As an accountant or a person with a sedentary occupation is not going to have huge biceps where, according to some authorities, 80% of that hypertrophy, enlargement of the muscle, is the accommodation of that energy.
Right.
The accommodation of that fluid, which is...
I'm with you. So the muscle itself, the mass of the muscle itself, might be 20% fibre and 80%
That's
energy
correct.
to make
Yes,
to use
correct.
the fibre.
Yeah.
Okay.
20% fibre
Okay.
and structure and 80% fuel,
Fuel, okay.
and liquid
Okay,
that contains the fuel.
So therefore, in a strange way, your muscles are full of fat in a different form.
Of course. Of course.
I'm going to write this out as a rough, you see.
You've
You're
got
going to have to go and
it's
say that
correct.
doesn't read too
Yeah,
well.
well, we'll correct
okay.
it.
Okay, so
you get the
but
concept.
I'm still uneasy about this. In other words, if I
What
was
are
an
you
Irish
uneasy about?
navvy,
Yeah,
and my main, if I looked at the bulk of my food in the day,
yeah.
and it consisted of 90% spuds, 5% bacon and 5% vegetables,
Right.
but I did a heavy job,
Yeah.
I would grow muscle from the spud.
Not necessarily, you wouldn't. Not necessarily, because the body has several types of energy, but the carbohydrate derived energy is the primary energy for the body. But you have pyruvate energy, write these words down and we'll check them for you later, or fat derived energy.
Fire,
You know,
burning.
Fat,
Energy.
fat will provide energy sufficient for a navvy, and unless the protein structure is there, the navvy is not going to greatly enlarge his muscles.
So where does, if
He will develop his muscles. His energy will adapt itself to his energy regime and to his diet regime.
okay, but what about the actual mass of the body itself? How will that constitute itself if he needs larger muscle mass? For instance, if he's
He
digging
doesn't need larger
and he has to
muscle mass.
stoop and stand up.
He doesn't need larger muscle mass. If the work he's doing is of a constant variety, the predominant
Yes, right.
the predominant requisite for bodybuilding is progressive resistance training. Once your body and your muscle comes used to a set amount of work, you increase it. Therefore, you increase the demand. You're calling for more energy. That's the basic principle of bodybuilding, is progressive resistance. You don't get that in a navvy or a person doing a particular type of work all day.
So, just to digress a minute, to put this down, if the essence of bodybuilding, so, if the essence of progressive bodybuilding,
The
is-
essence of bodybuilding, not progressive
okay,
bodybuilding,
the essence of bodybuilding
is
is progressive
progressive
weight,
resistance.
progressive resistance.
The essential
Then-
requirement.
Somebody who, if that's a definition of bodybuilding,
Oh, it is.
then somebody who takes, who makes the mass bigger by other means is not a bodybuilder. Then are they?
Well, I agree with you. They're not. They're not in the true meaning of the word.
Or maybe in the old-fashioned sense of the word,
They're
like
not.
achievement. So
And then
therefore,
we're coming into areas of linguistic interpretation. And
okay,
then-
so clearly, if every bodybuilder achieved more muscle mass by, what was the word again?
progressive resistance.
Progressive resistance, then obviously that's where the word achievement comes in.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
And so,
But the modern bodybuilder doesn't strictly follow the progressive resistance requirement, because today there are substances. One known substance is synthol, which is an oil-based compound which you can inject into your muscle and greatly increase its size. Temporary, according to some authorities, the increased size will last 3 to 5 years. Now that is the increased size in the muscle is not the accommodation of energy, i.e. glucose or glycogen.
Right.
It is the accommodation of this oil compound.
right, okay.
The,
So like the space between the
requirement for
fire-
bodybuilding has been fulfilled because the muscle has been built up.
But isn't that dangerous? Because when that bodybuilder attempts to use that muscle to lift a weight,
Yeah.
and the energy source isn't there, there's going to be...
Oh no, the natural inhibitants in the body, when there's no energy, the body will tire, regardless of its size or anything else. It'll just tire and you'll stop doing it.
Okay.
But muscles are in effect the fuse that stops you blowing the mains. When the energy's gone, you will stop.
All the way down then, Terry, can I achieve bigger muscle mass without any training at all? That's the other
In the
side
true meaning of the word muscle mass,
Yeah.
no, you can't. If you want an apparent increase in muscle size,
Yes.
yes, you can.
So what about steroids then? When I take a steroid, what does that do?
The primary effect of anabolic steroids is to retain fluid. Steroids, one of the real reasons why steroids were brought about was for, how can I put this one? If you were to have first degree burns all over your body,
Yes.
you wouldn't die of the burns, you would die of dehydration.
Right.
And steroids are a medicine that forces the body to retain fluid.
Right.
That was one of the initial
Yeah.
uses of steroids
Right.
from the 1980s.
So clearly,
So when you take anabolic steroids, you are increasing. It does two things. It increases. All anabolic steroids are derivatives of testosterone or testosterone itself,
right.
which gives you the androgen or maleness effect, the aggression, the energy, the recovery power to do your work, your muscle building
What us
workouts
men do.
in the gym,
Right.
right? And women these days, some of the women today are nearly as good as the men, you know. But the manner in which they are constructed also leads to a great degree of fluid retention. Some different steroids have different abilities to do this.
So clearly I can see now how it's possible to drive a wedge into the old-fashioned view of achievement by woollying up the idea of bodybuilding. I think this stems from the following. See what you think of this. The old idea of bodybuilding was to get bigger muscles, and the subconscious definition of that was muscles are sort of like steak. They're full of muscle stuff, and this is intimately related to being stronger. Whereas in actual fact, the additional information like, no, you need this medium to maintain an energy supply, makes the whole thing a slightly different. If you went into bodybuilding and into selling bodybuilders things, you'd go, what you need is a bit of mumbo jumbo here. You do the weight and you get fatigue and blah blah. What you need here is something which keeps the energy supply near to the muscle or from the selected place it's supposed to come from,
Right.
and this will increase your what's the buzzword then? Efficiency.
Yeah, yeah.
You've been
what you've said. I mean, what you've said is correct. You have got the mumbo jumbo, and the mumbo jumbo is the food supplement industry. They are supplying the mumbo jumbo.
And are bodybuilders clear about? See, I think if I was clear about the following, I want to have a bigger bicep. In order to have a bigger bicep, I've got to go through a series of curl exercises, probably culminating something like a preacher curl or something, where I'm doing the heads on something very specific. Now, if it was explained to me that wait a minute, to get that muscle mass bigger, you need this food supply. And that will make it bigger, but it'll be stronger, so it'll need to be bigger. And I would then ask the following question. I would be very focused. Only give me the fucking stuff for that.
Yeah, but
does that now
let me clear it up a little
bleed?
bit. There's an old bodybuilding adage or saying which is very, very true. The exercise provides the need for the muscle. Food provides the muscle. Food provides the means.
Watch.
Exercise provides the need.
Right.
You know, exercise then represents work. The muscle is working as
Right.
it is designed. Every muscle you have is designed to move the skeleton in a particular manner, in order to enable you to live, to
Right.
function, to move. The whole
It's a
body,
human being,
the human
right.
body is designed for one
It
purpose.
does things, doesn't it?
It moves.
Yes,
It's
it
got to be
does
active.
things,
That's
and,
correct. So the muscles are there, and they have the adaptability to increase in size and capacity if the energy demand on them is increased.
Right.
Now, in order to do that, there has to be in 99.9% of circumstances, there has to be an increase of some sort in muscle size.
Right.
That's
Can you
the
tell?
actual
Can you say something
structure-
about
the
if there
actual
wasn't?
structure of the muscle fibres itself?
So when I say like I haven't trained,
Let
now
me-
I'm training and my muscles are stronger,
Yes.
I might have
They
the
may-
wrong idea here.
Yes, you may have. I mean, people misconstrue or misunderstand strength with stamina. Let me see. The actual muscle strength would depend upon the muscle fibres. The energy or stamina will depend upon the energy supply. Let me demonstrate
Yes,
that.
I can see
If you
that.
train them, that you see a lightweight weightlifter, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 stone, he's not overly muscle massed.
No.
His muscles are defined and distinctive and shaped, but he hasn't got hugely muscles. But he
He'd
can
be
lift
heavy,
tremendous weights above his head because he's trained in a particular way for strength. The muscle fibres themselves have strengthened, have grown and enlarged. It's only short bursts of energy that's required, so there's no demand for the extra liquid in the muscle, which is glycogen. But the
Right.
muscle structure itself is still very, very powerful and trained in that manner.
Right.
That's the difference between bodybuilding and
We
weightlifting.
would have to go into training, you see,
You've
because
got,
that's
well,
an area.
it's basic, but it is the difference between weightlifting and bodybuilding.
Okay, here's a question then. I don't want to be stronger particularly. I want to maintain my strength at a certain level for a long period of time, which you
Right.
call stamina.
Yeah.
Now, what would that
Well, that would depend
entail?
upon your energy supply and the degree of fitness, the overall level of fitness. Fitness is best defined as the ability for a person to carry out their everyday duties with a relative margin of safety.
So, okay, let me give you a specific
Their duties-
example.
Go on.
Let me give you a specific example. I want to play a left hand on the piano, which involves rocking like that.
Yeah, it involves a lot of things.
Right,
Go on.
okay, but essentially I'm moving my wrist.
Yeah.
Now, at some point it starts to hurt.
Yes.
And I'm going, but I'm not moving any mass. I mean, why does that happen? Is that the stamina?
There's an energy process there, and the energy process,
Yeah.
like any energy process, has a waste. And the
Oh,
waste,
yeah.
the waste in muscle use is called lactic acid.
Right.
Now that contributes greatly to the feeling of tiredness and exhaustion in the muscle, is the accumulation of lactic acid. The body, when we talk about stamina, we include the body's ability to extend that ability to
Yes,
deal with
yes.
the lactic acid and to carry on and carry on. But a point comes eventually where you have to stop.
Now,
The
you
body,
saying
the muscles and everything that's involved in the use of the hand do require rest and time to recuperate.
Right.
So a built-in safeguard for that is the accumulation of the lactic acid, which prevents you from going
any further?
any further.
Now, what if I'm having great difficulty extending the period?
Yes.
Is there anything I can do?
Well, the further out you extend it, the more difficult it's going to become to extend it. That's best demonstrated with, like, the 4-minute mile. The 4-minute mile was broken 50 years ago.
Right. Yes.
Now it's taken them, with all the modern knowledge and the changes in technology, the benefits and advantages of modern tracks, modern footwear, modern nutrition and everything else, they've only knocked 10 seconds off it,
That's true. Yes.
you know.
Yes. So you're saying something like this: if you want to extend stamina in a particular muscle group,
Yes.
then genetic, and we use the buzzword at the moment, then when the acid kicked in, what's it is?
The lactic acid.
When the lactic acid kicks in,
Yes.
that's determined by other things taking over.
Not necessarily, no, it's determined by the energy, the fuel burn up in the muscle. The residue left, the smoke that's coming out the exhaust pipe in the car, and the secretions leaving the animal and everything else. That is the waste from the muscle is lactic acid. It's the leftover from the energy process.
And there's nothing you can
But
do
if
about
you-
that
if you
being... Is
recall-
that removed by the bloodstream?
Yes, of course it is. And it can be used, and is used, as an energy supply.
Oh.
It can be turned in what they call a pyruvate energy supply, the lactic acid, then in an anaerobic, not an aerobic, which is oxygen and carbohydrate burning.
Yeah.
There is an anaerobic
Yeah.
energy process which the lactic acid becomes involved in. The body is extremely efficient.
Yes, it'll use
But if you
anything,
recall,
won't it?
Mr. Hardy, in the opening chapter we decided, we said that this book was to help people who want to become fit and healthy.
Right.
And we did qualify ourselves in there and saying, yes, everybody can become fit and healthy to a degree, all subject to their genetic inheritance.
Yes, I remember that.
The
Yes.
whole thing is subject to their genetic inheritance. If, like me, you're 5'6" and you've come from a line of malnourished people,
Yes.
you know, and all that goes with the
Yes.
resultant continuance of malnourishment, of course your potential is going to be limited with regard to a person who's 6 foot odd and everything else.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yes, of course I do. But the reason I'm asking the question, I do take your point. But if we're going to say that everybody can be healthy, then I would say for Joe Average, he embarks on something and he stops because it hurts.
Yes.
And I'm trying to identify these areas by thinking of things, by things you want to do. See,
these are the factors.
Me in the summer, I go to Montreux for 3 weeks,
Right.
and I deliberately work very hard physically. I carry equipment around which you don't have to carry around. You know what I mean? I go 5 flights of stairs about 30 times a day, right?
Yeah.
In order to do that, I start about March by getting what we would say fit. I get the
These
right
are,
now. The first thing I notice is that I have to be very careful, right? I do like 20 push-ups.
Yeah.
Right? After that, I'd go, no, wait, I'd start by doing 20 push-ups. After that, I'd go, don't go silly. Don't try and do 35, 40, because tomorrow you're going to be like that, oh, God. Now,
the stiffness and everything else is the accumulation of lactic acid, and the body's
Right.
inability, due to it being not a regular feature of your lifestyle.
this is what I wanted to hear. Now,
The body develops channels actually to get rid of the lactic acid.
this is what I wanted to ask. So,
That can only come with...
is this a hump then in training?
It's not a hump. It's not a hump.
I'll tell you why I'm going to say this, because if you can explain to people in a satisfactory way,
Well, you can.
why they go to train and they buy all the gear and they don't come back after
Right.
the third day. If you can say to them, you have to turn a corner, don't worry.
No, you don't. The correct way, if you go into a gymnasium or you're going to embark upon an exercise regime to increase your fitness,
Yes.
your stamina and everything else, do it gradually. So the build-up of lactic acid is gradual, and you give the body's repair system a chance to accommodate the removal of that lactic acid.
Yeah, but what happens with
Then
most,
you will not suffer the stiffness.
what most people do, Terry, you know
They
what...
hit it hard.
Now, one of the things about the book should be that this is explained.
Yeah, well, we'll explain that.
Because I don't
We'd,
think
we'd have an explanation. Now, let me...
the industry don't take care of this.
Forget all that. I'll give you the fodder, and then you. We go on. Energy processes of the human body. You stated. Don't interrupt me till I tell you. You said you go away to Montrose.
Yeah.
And you do work that you create energy demands upon your body that it's unaccustomed to. I.e., you move and your equipment and everything else.
Right.
You know. Now, your body has systems to deal with that. Unusual demands upon the body, which are not met because you haven't acclimatized the muscles or got the muscles used to doing that.
Right.
Therefore, the normal energy supply that one would associate with the muscle structure and everything is not there. So what happens? You can't not move the thing, unless it's exceptionally heavy, and wouldn't matter if you had the muscle power or not, you couldn't move it.
Right.
But what the body resorts to is another beautiful energy system, the adrenaline and noradrenaline. Energy created to make the muscles work in extreme circumstances, unusual circumstances,
Right.
far more efficiently, by the way, than the normal glycogen sugar process. Far
Right.
more efficiently, but it's designed by the body, by God or nature, depending upon your belief, for unusual and short-lived times. If you have too much noradrenaline or too much adrenaline
Here's
in the
the-
bloodstream,
here's the bill.
there's dangers of heart problems and everything else. So
Right.
your body has an emergency energy supply,
Right.
which is in the form of adrenaline or noradrenaline.
Right. Which
And
is
that,
why I
that will
feel-
enable you to cope with unusual, sudden demands.
Which is why I feel naturally inclined, at least 3 months before I go, to very slowly
No, that is, it's nothing to do
tone
with
things up.
No, it's nothing to do with the physiological need for that. You are aware psychologically
Yes.
of that, and that is prompting your need to start an exercise regime because you are aware
I know what Latin.
You know, as you do it, you increase your capacity to do it.
Right, and that's what I'm doing.
And that's what you're doing.
So I'm not a sort of toning up the muscle.
Your brain has no way of knowing, other than you telling it, that the exercise you're doing is carrying a deer home to dinner or exercising with a barbell. All your brain knows is there is an increased demand for energy in that area. And the brain, if you're putting the wherewithal into your system,
right,
the brain will then supply that needed energy.
Right, okay. All right, fair enough.
But don't lose sight of the fact, if we list all of these things that I'm saying and we present them correctly, we've got the answer to the mumbo jumbo. And I am fascinated with that mumbo jumbo being the food supplement industry.
Well, it's a spell, isn't it?
It is a spell, and they put people under a spell.
Yes, of course.
When you get people, you know, with seemingly authoritative qualifications who say diets don't work, people believe them.
Yes.
And that leads to further problems. They very, very quickly, they buy the book, diets don't work, and they read it, and they get nowhere, because if you pay attention to the nonsense in it, you're not going to get anywhere.
Okay, let me turn this off now.
Why?
Because I want to... So, okay, in broad terms then, fat is related to me walking you into this gym. What is it as regards you walking into this gym? Have I got this right? Fat is stored energy.
That's correct.
Which means I'm accumulating energy that I'm not using.
Yes.
Okay, so...
Which is an intrinsic factor built into the body over millions of years to provide for the feast and famine process.
Okay.
The body, in order for mankind to survive, I mean, and especially in areas where seasons are extreme.
Through the winter,
you know, there has to be an ability,
February,
that's correct, there has to be an ability to store food.
So this is an inheritance.
So it is an inheritance, it is extremely necessary.
Yeah.
You know, in times when man was more physically active than he is today, you couldn't survive without that stored body fat. But also fat is required in its true glycemol definition. Fat is essential for the correct biochemical functions of the body.
Can you tell us why simply?
Why simply?
Because then fat is good. The next question I was going to ask you, is it bad or is it good? Now,
fat is only good.
Well, you said last week that obesity...
Yeah,
well, which I wanted to say, because you can say it's bad when it's obese. And you mentioned a fascinating thing about 10 pounds of water to 1 pound of solid.
Yes, of course.
So can we go into that? So is it good? You've just said now it's essential for a biochemical...
For the normal biochemical functions of the body, fat is an essential nutrient.
Easy.
Let me, and again in an earlier chapter, you can...
Yeah.
What are the nutrients? The nutrients are proteins, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, and water.
Right.
They're the nutrients for the human body. Right. The body, to form or to perform or function as it should, the body has got to have all of those nutrients.
Right. Okay.
Now there are many processes in the human body that fat is required for. I'll get you a list of them.
Can you give me one, a major one? What's a major one that's fat?
The functioning of the heart. The function of the liver. The liver can't function without sufficient fat in it. In order for it to do the many chemical processes.
Okay, and what about
detoxifying?
The heart?
The main function of the liver is to detoxify whatever's going in.
Fat's essential to the process.
Now we can't do that without fat.
So let me get this right. I eat food, it's converted into fat, and then the liver converts the fat into or uses the fat.
That's an oversimplification. Yes.
Yeah.
The liver does use the fat.
Well, I'll put that in. This is an
process.
Okay, but in what sense does the heart use the fat?
In what sense? Well, your blood. The main reason for the blood is to carry the nutrients and the fuel around to wherever it's needed, to every cell in the body.
Right, okay.
Right? Now, in order to do that, imagine the amount of substances in the blood.
Right,
I mean, some sources say as many as 100,000 different types of substances in the blood.
Right, okay, fair enough.
You have a blood fat, the triglycerides or blood fats.
Yeah.
Now, that needs a qualification, so bear with me on that.
Yeah, okay,
you know, they go in one very, very important fat, much maligned fat, is cholesterol. Cholesterol does thousands of different functions in the human body. One of the main functions of it is the clotting factor. Without it, you'd be a haemophiliac. It also is hugely active in the production of testosterone. Without cholesterol, you have got no testosterone. There is a fat performing a very, very basic, essential function in the body. Fat is very, very important.
So cholesterol is a fat?
Cholesterol is a fat.
Right, okay.
One of its functions is to keep the other fats in the blood in a state of emulsion, so they can go around the system doing what they're supposed to do. due to reasons not really understood even today, something happens to the cholesterol in the blood, and it starts to flare up in the arteries and prevents the fats, the normal fats, going around and doing their job. And American research has shown over the last 50 years the consumption of salt, sugar, processed foods contribute greatly to that.
Oh, they're not going to put that out to
Oh, well,
us,
they will. The Americans will. The Americans are very, very sound and clear on salt, sugar and white flour being a main cause of cholesterol not being able to do its job. Salt, sodium chloride, is not found in any form of diet anywhere in the world. It's man-made, it's added, and it's not necessary. The human body, we've just said, there's a huge industry built up on fat-free food and don't eat fats and everything else. If you delete fats from your body, you would die quite quickly. You know, now, if you were to delete the advocate of salt, or the biased person will come and say, you've got to have salt, your body can't function without salt. Correct. Mineral salts found where they're meant to be found, in the food itself, mainly the vegetables. You get sufficient, you get all that's required from your vegetables.
So eating salty food is actually a cultural thing, it's an acquired taste.
It's an acquired taste. Salt was used primarily, we used the Romans as an example, and that's suffice. It was used as a preservative.
Right, yeah.
You know, a preservative.
So it's come through...
And it's come through,
okay,
through a cultural thing, not from a nutritional point of view.
Still don't understand. I can see the liver using fats in the process of doing what it does. I'm still not sure about that. So this is the question I wanted to ask you. Basically about, is fat any good? If I could ingest food,
Yeah.
right, put it in the stomach, and this then is broken down, and then couldn't that be used for this heart thing? I mean, why do I have to have fat? Why do I have...
Well, let's have a look. Let's have a
wrong?
look at what you're saying.
Do you see what I mean?
Ingest food and you break it down for what purpose?
To nutrient.
No, hang on. Let's have a look at what the rate at which we eat food for two things. We said before, qualification of food is it must both nourish and sustain you.
Right. Yes.
Basic physiology tells us that the cells which the human body is constructed of renew themselves all the time.
Right.
The most common cells 24 to 48 hours, depending upon which source you believe.
Right, okay.
There are cells in the brain, the liver, and things which take 6 months or a year to renew themselves, but nevertheless they are in a continual process all the time of renewing themselves.
No problem with that.
But the main cellular structure of the human body is reproducing itself every couple of days. Right?
Right. Okay.
And that is where the nourishing part of the food requirement comes in. In order to reproduce the cells, protein is required, and fats, vitamins and minerals to assist in the chemical process of converting the protein into the cells. And
Right.
by the way, there's a little bit of light-heartedness, but very, very
relevant.
very relevant is this, is in order for that process to be as efficient as it should be, and the efficiency is determined by your genetic inheritance, the quality of the food going in must be as high as possible. There's an old saying, quality in, quality out.
Yes,
Your body has the ability to use inferior or substandard substances.
If it has to.
If it has to. But the end product, the reproduced cell, will be inferior. That's malnutrition.
Nice.
That is malnutrition.
Against nutrition, yeah.
And the body is not performing as it should. It is still performing because it has this built-in survival capacity.
All right, so...
Am I brilliant, Bob?
It's great, this. I mean, it's not that... I mean, it's obviously...
But remember that.
It's the explanation.
In order for us, I'm going to give you bags to work on. In order for us to comply with that, every person alive has the right to be as healthy as they can and to be as fit as they can. A basic requirement for that is correct cellular reproduction. So the cells reproducing themselves as good as they possibly can.
Okay.
That's dependent not only upon on the amount of, or the quality of the food going in, but also on the efficiency of a very, very vital element in the human body, which is circulation.
Okay, so I'm going to make a statement now. Does this make any sense to you?
Go on.
I eat food, and some of it's converted into fat.
Yes.
And
No, the fat is in the food. The
fat is extracted?
There is fat in the food that you eat.
Right. Okay, so...
Right.
Now
the body
uses, again.
Go on.
I eat food
Yes.
which contains fat.
Yes.
The body removes the fat.
The body digests and separates the fat, and digests it actually quite separately from the protein and carbohydrate.
Okay, well, I'm sticking with the fat.
Yeah.
Which it then stores in the form of what you said before.
No, it doesn't store the fat in that form. It partly stores some of the fat in that form, but the majority of the fat cell, what we call fat, if you recall, we said this substance here, this subcutaneous substance beneath the skin, which we call fat, consists of actual glycol or fat, but it mainly consists of converted carbohydrates in the form of glucose or glycogen. Right. So in essence, to be absolutely correct, your fat cell does consist of some actual glycol fats, oily fats, but glycogen contributes a great deal. Glycogen and glucose, and the water in which it's contained is the major constituents of the fat cell.
Right, but I'm going to keep on with this. Okay.
Go on.
I eat food.
Yeah.
The fat's extracted.
Right.
And it finds itself in my body inside one of my fat cells.
Right.
In basically two forms, the oily bit and the sugary bit.
That's correct.
Is that all right?
With water.
Okay, and water. The oily bit, the sugary bit, and water.
Water, yeah.
Okay, now we can go into the various.
That's correct.
Okay, now this fat which I've got in my body, in the form of a cell, is used. You say itself is used by the heart. It isn't.
No, I didn't say that at all. Fat is required. Fat in a different way. We're talking about two different issues here. We're talking about the biological function of fat in the working process of the human body. A fat cell, regardless of what it consists of, is stored energy waiting to be used, reserve energy.
Right.
So you've got to forget the function of fat as required in the processes in the liver and the heart, because normally that fat is found in the blood, and the energy, by the way, for that process is found in the blood. And the only time the body will then call upon your stored oily fat and sugary fat in the fat cell is when those supplies in the blood have run out.
So if I
is that clear?
Yeah. Well, this is what I'm getting to. If I could maintain that level of fat and energy in the blood, could I do without fat completely?
Of course you do. Of course you do. And that is done by regulating either your energy expenditure or your energy input, i.e. your
diet.
Food. Diet.
So the question is, do I have to have any fat at all?
Yes.
The answer to that is
yes.
Well, I don't. But
Yes,
but in the blood.
Yes. You do have to have fat in your food.
But not. It doesn't have to be stored in the body.
It doesn't have to be. Of course it doesn't.
But you would, privately aside, do you think that would be a bad thing if I attempted?
No. You have to qualify it a little bit. There are.
Do you see what I'm getting at?
I know exactly what you're getting at, and there are answers to everything you're saying, and good answers, and they are the correct answers. It's quite easy if you study different people and cultures. The Eskimo has huge reserves of fat.
For obvious reasons.
For insulation reasons.
Yeah, it's for
correct.
Reason.
Correct. So, it's essential that he has that subcutaneous fat to remain healthy. To remain healthy, in order for him, what did we say about health? Health is the degree of health is the degree through which you are free from disease or impairment.
Right.
The fitness is the degree of your fitness is the ability to do your everyday activities with a margin of safety. Now, that is not dependent essentially on subcutaneous fat.
No.
But it is dependent upon, in the case of the Eskimo, or various similar other cultures who live in very, very cold climates. They accumulate fat not only for energy reserves, but also as insulation.
Right. Well, yes, of course, yes. Just a second, I wanted to...
I'm
going to ask you again.
Go on.
I've come in your gym.
Yeah.
I'm overweight. Not a lot.
Yes.
Do you understand? Are there levels at which I can understand the following questions? What is fat?
Yes.
Could you say to me, this is what it is for your purposes? Your fat is stored energy.
I think there are very, very simple explanations as to what is fat. If you start to explain, for purposes of this book, it's essential that I put this preamble.
It's going in.
This preamble chapter in, and that is this: the processes of the human body, the function, and everything else that the human body has done is known as the metabolic rate or metabolic process.
Right.
Do you understand that?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Right. The metabolic is a mixture of, I think it's Greek words, but check in anyway. Meta meaning breakdown and bollock meaning build up. Yeah. The human body, we said before, is an ongoing process of cells dying off and replenishing themselves, dying down, building up. That is the metabolic rate. Yeah. Not only the rate at which the process of the cells reproducing themselves,
Right.
but the elements to which the cells belong and the function that those elements do, i.e. your kidneys, your heart, your lungs, your muscles, your skeletons, your bones, it's all a process of breaking down and replacing. That is your metabolic rate. In order for those processes, in all cases, to function as they should, it is necessary for you to have the nutrients which are required, and fat is one of those essential nutrients.
Right.
In fact, I find myself at odds. If a nutrient, by definition, should be essential anyway, but fat is an essential element to the metabolic processes of the human body. That's the fat derived from the oily substances, glycol, and we'll get you the correct names.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Right, now, when people come into a gym and they say, I'm overweight with this fat, can you tell me what is this fat? They're referring to the subcutaneous fat, the fat immediately beneath the skin on the outer part of the skeleton. There is some similar fat inside called, I think it's called, I'll come back to it in a minute.
So
but anyway, there is some,
box
which is used, no, I'll come to it, I know it in a minute, which is used as a protection around the organs. That fat is of similar substance to the energy fat on the outside of the skeleton and on the inside of the skin, subcutaneous fat, which is
Right.
in each fat cell, and the cell is just a compartment that holds it, there is small amounts of the glycol fat, but the rest of it is glycogen, converted carbohydrate,
Right.
carbohydrate and water.
Right.
Visceral
Yeah.
fat is the fat in the internal, and there as a protection for the organs,
Yeah.
your kidneys and your liver and
Right,
your heart.
yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
Visceral fat.
So my major concern for being healthy would be the amount of subcutaneous fat I'm carrying around.
You may find, depending, I don't know where you're coming from, you may think that it is necessary for you to be healthy to have less. It is in these circumstances. If the amount of excess fat that you're carrying is sufficient, like anybody normally 2 stone overweight at any size is putting an increased burden on the heart.
Right.
The heart has to pump around not only the blood vessels that's actually involved in the 2 stone of fat, but it's like carrying 28 pound of potatoes around with you all day. It's a strain, a constant strain on the heart and the joints and everything else. So it does interfere with your health, and it will interfere with your health, and it will limit the degree of good health that you should enjoy.
So we're seeking a balance then
That's correct.
between shall we use the term, correct amount of stored energy and an abundance of stored energy.
That's
now,
correct.
in your opinion, let's say opinion, or is it scientific fact, is the amount of fat I should carry around quantifiable in terms of its mass, like a pound, 2 pound, 2 stone, or or do you see it in terms of time? Do you go, well, strictly speaking, every human being should have at least 1 week's fat on him? In terms
It's
of,
difficult.
How do you
Very,
see
very
this?
difficult to quantify. I don't think any scientific source would try and quantify it. I think the old adage, if you can pinch an inch, that's sufficient. So if you can pinch an inch around your waist, that's sufficient. But remember this.
Got a back place on?
No, I've got my rubbers on, for me. I've been training this morning. You'll get
Right.
an inch if you go. But remember this.
Right,
We're
so
talking
take your
about, we're coming away from the original purpose of fat being stored energy or insulation. Modern man with the modern living does not require the amount of stored energy for emergency purposes or insulation purposes that the man of 100 or 200 or 2,000 or 2 million
And you're
years
saying,
ago.
and this is a good thing, because if you can carry less around because of your cultural circumstances, it's less strain on the heart.
It's good in any way at all. The digestive process of the human body, and in ingesting, breaking down and building up a meal, which is the digestive process, there is an enormous amount of energy used. 2/3 of the body's blood is used in the digestion of a full-size meal.
So in order to get in order to extract the fat, we've got to use a load of energy.
No, in order to extract what is to be extracted from the food that you're ingesting,
Right.
there is an energy process which is very taxing on the human body. So it makes sense to anybody, regardless of what purpose, compromise or anything else, to only eat the amount of food that's required. And if the degree of fat here becomes unacceptable, it means you're eating too much food. A side effect of that is the energy demands upon the body to do it, and the actual process of digesting
Yes.
is harmful to the human body. It's like wear and tear. So if you can only eat what you required, you are bound to be more healthy. The blood is bound to be carrying less impurities, less other things which need to be filtered out by the kidneys and the liver and the other processes, the white blood cells and everything else. And therefore, it's like putting less diluted water into filters.
Okay,
the cleaner the water is, the more efficient the filter will be, and
yes,
the better the product
in this
comes out the other
particular
side.
instance, then, are some foods easier to digest than others, whatever that means?
Of course they are easier to digest. Of course the body has, the body can digest any
Yes.
food that's food for a human being. It takes the longest time digesting the fat. The digestion of carbohydrate and protein is held back until the fat is digested.
So if I have a meal which has protein, carbohydrate and fat in, I could find myself in a queue, sort of, my body's going to digest the fat.
You'll find a fad in modern dietary sources today, magazines, television, programs and everything else. They say your diet should consist of, at one stage it was 40% fat, now it's down to 25% of your diet should be fat.
Right.
Now that's extremely difficult to quantify. I defy anybody, even a scientist with most up-to-date laboratory equipment, to really define 25% of the diet as fat. They're sales gimmicks. They're part of the mumbo jumbo. I mean,
what degree of accuracy could you say, Terry?
You can't. I mean,
well, if I eat a spud,
I think,
am I eating carbohydrates? Or?
You're eating starch, carbohydrate, a form of starch.
I'm not eating any fat.
You're not eating fat in a spud, no.
So you could say there are ways of having substance.
Oh, of course there are ways of limiting it and cutting it down. Of course they are.
Yeah.
I mean, when we talk about fats, mostly we're talking about animal fats. There are vegetables which contain fat, the avocado, pear and such like that. They do contain fats, which are similar in structure and performance to animal fats. But the main way that we can, the main way that which we limit fats going in is to limit the amount of animal protein which we ingest.
So what you're saying is fat is essential for good health. Fats come predominantly from animal products.
Yes.
And that if we don't get the animal fat products...
It's found in nut products and certain vegetables, but there are different types and consistencies of fat. There are saturated fats and unsaturated fats and this fats and that fats and everything else.
So why then? Oh no, I remember now. And this has got something to do with this has got something to do with the quality of this nutriment that you take in. If you take an inferior nutrient, so the body doesn't break down then into atoms. It must break down into something. It doesn't rebuild from electrons and protons.
No, of course it doesn't.
It builds from bigger blocks.
Of course it does.
And
it becomes the building blocks. The actual bodily structures are building blocks of what's called amino acids, which are constituents of the various elements, hydrogen.
So protein and fat in your body. Your fat,
yes.
This visceral fat, which you need, you've said.
Yeah, you do.
I mean, it is a question as to whether you need the subcutaneous fat. No. You certainly need the visceral, and the protein in your body, and presumably bone stuff, and all that. They are all built from amino acids.
No, they're not. Only the body structures are built of amino acids.
What else is to be said?
The fats consist of glycols, which are fatty compounds. They're not protein compounds. I'll have to get that for you, Bob.
Okay, so the question. Well, I've got an hour. That is very dense.
You should leave that in.
Okay, what we have to do next week is we have to shelve fat, so do a write-up on fat.
Yeah.
And we have to start seriously
on
food.
What is food?
And that's going to go right at the beginning as well. We've got to focus now.
Food is the essential nutrients for the species.
Right.
I don't know how you can define that any better. Give me time and I'll get a better definition. But food is the substance that is required for the survival of the species.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Now, you will get different species requiring different forms of food. We take our food generally from all sources. We sit down and we eat substances which are not foods. There was a time not too long ago in the United States where the breakfast cereals couldn't by law be called foods because the American Food and Drug Administration law says To qualify for being called a food, you must prove to us
Right.
that the substance nourishes and sustains you.
Okay.
And most cereals didn't. They provided you with an amount of energy, and the rest didn't. So they called themselves cereals.
Okay, just a second, I'm going to turn this off.
Out food, and it'll give you.
Okay, this is a start.
It'll give you food for thought.
Okay, go on.
Food, it must be specific to the species,
Right.
right? I mean, if you take the average North European and certainly British inhabitant,
Yeah.
the diet has changed dramatically over the last 100 years. Certainly extremely dramatic over the last 200 years. I mean, was it Captain Cook that introduced the potato?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, before that, there was life here, and people functioned perfectly well without the potato. The potato now is an essential staple part of our diet.
Right.
Now, you know, there are certain other foods which are relatively new.
Right.
The exotic fruits,
Yeah.
things of that nature. Lots of them don't really qualify for being called food. There are substances which we ingest and take it.
Which aren't really, I like that. Which
Well,
aren't really
listen,
food.
if you take, let's have a look at seeds. Let's have a look at nuts. Let's have a look at that area,
Right.
which all qualify and come under the banner of food. Now,
Right.
think that there is a breakfast cereal which contains nuts and everything else. I mean, we can't use the thing. What's it called?
Muesli, you mean?
Muesli.
Yeah.
And muesli is not a food. It's a food for animals. You've got bird seed in it, and you've got all kinds of things in it.
Yeah.
Seeds are made by nature to be indigestible, to pass through the digestive process and hopefully be deposited in the secretions
Yes.
which will provide the nutrients for that seed to grow in and therefore perpetuate its species.
Right.
Now, we have bastardised that, certainly in nuts and certainly in one or two other cereals. But the only way your body, nuts are made by nature to be indigestible. You eat a handful of peanuts and don't chew them and swallow them, they'll come out the way they are. To get the benefit, doubtful benefits, and I say benefits in parenthesis, from the nuts, it is necessary for you to masticate them, to chew them thoroughly.
But aren't there animals which are nut eaters?
Of course there are, but you'll find that, you know, they depend upon other forms. How can you? They're part of an evolutionary.
Aren't nuts rich in anything, Terry?
Nuts are extremely rich in fats. Some nuts are extremely rich in proteins, and therefore a good energy source.
Right.
But you can, as I said, you have to masticate them. You've got to chew them. If I swallow 6 peanuts now and I go to the toilet in the morning, 6 peanuts will be there. I
Right.
know it. I've tried it many, many times.
Right.
But if I masticate them, I chew them, there's no sign of them.
Right.
Because my digestive process will work upon them
Right.
in the chewed and broken down. The amylases and the digestive juices in the mouth will have longer to work upon them.
Right.
You know, the
right.
fact that they are made into a paste will give the digestive juices in the stomach and the acids and everything else longer to work on them. Tomato seeds, it's a very famous thing.
Yeah.
If you go to sewage plants, you'll see millions of tomatoes growing because tomato seeds pass through the human process without being interfered with. The body is not equipped to
Well,
break
it
them
seems
down.
perfectly obvious that
So that
nuts are
tells you
designed-
something. That tells you something.
So, well, what about the covering of a nut? That is to say, the fruit.
Yeah.
Is that a different thing? Is that a good thing?
Well, the covering of fruit is there for particular different purposes. I mean, the nuts have got a very, very hard exterior. That's to deter some forms of danger to them, some form of animals. Other forms of animals will accept it. The fruit is designed by nature or by God to be attractive to certain types of animals to go through the process.
So you eat the fruit
Yeah.
because it's good, because it's a benefit, and not only to you but a benefit to the plant or whatever.
I'm a believer in that. We have evolved to our available food processes, and you'll find in lots of fruits.
Yes.
Fruit is a delicate area to talk about nutrition. You know, in fruits there are vitamins, not a great deal of mineral content in them.
Right.
But they are an excellent source of certain vitamins. You know, the pulp and everything of the actual fruit itself surrounds the seed.
Right.
You know,
Right,
in the
yes.
apple, the pear,
Yeah,
the
right,
orange,
right.
and everything else. So, you know, the pulp contains the nutrients necessary for the survival of the seed, whether it passes through a digestive process or not.
Right.
If an orange falls in the grove and rolls away and beds itself in, that orange will reproduce itself because the nutrients necessary for the seed inside the orange are there in the pulp surrounding it.
So you would say there's an equally good argument that fruit isn't there for birds to eat and then fly away
Now,
with the
fruit, and I've never seen this anywhere, but fruit is designed by nature
to provide
pulpy fruits
a spaceship for
as
the
a laxative. fruit is nature's laxative.
Right.
It forces the species to defecate and therefore deposit the seeds that are in the fruit in the defecation, which is a suitable medium for the reproduction of the fruit. That's right. Think about it.
Yes, of course, yes.
Think about
Yes,
it.
Yes, I'm not going to put